why do you need adversity to be great? Say hello to my wife. I'm having what's known as a wardrobe malfunction. She is cutting my hair. This has been a dream of hers.
You can endear me to your millions of viewers.
To humiliate me on the air.
I always cry even though it isn't allowed. So proud.
You make me want to be a better streamer.
A better streamer.
No, definitely not that. Do you need adversity to be great?
Your skill is you tee up your guests and you make them look, so good.
Yeah. Oh, such a good question. Gets me all fired up, man. Such a good interviewer. I'm ready to go. Jump to the screen. But no, so true.
They can't see I'm dancing by myself.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Corona TV. Today is Wednesday, I believe. But if it isn't Wednesday, it's Thursday. It's definitely not Tuesday. I know this much is true because yesterday was Blackout Tuesday. And, it's so interesting because I have Chris West coming on the show. I would probably describe him as he's a word geek. He's a language geek. He's a grammar geek. He loves the stuff, and I love him for loving the stuff. But words matter, and the choice of words matter. And we had an amazing conversation in the green room. Maybe I'll call it the black room because I'm keeping my background the same. I kind of like the contrast. But we were talking about how people take words and they assign different meanings, and sometimes those meanings can be exactly what was intended, and sometimes it could be something else completely. And the one thing that was interesting is, people, look, everybody wanted to participate yesterday. Everybody wanted to make a difference. And so what came up very quickly is don't use the hashtag Black Lives Matter. Use Blackout Tuesday, but say the word or the phrase, Black Lives Matter, but don't use the hashtag, because people were using the hashtag to navigate, to collect information, to communicate, to connect. But the other part of it was Blackout Tuesday. Actually, what it meant was refrain from social media activity, refrain from posting. And I don't know how many people knew that. I didn't know that. I just thought it was all about changing your backgrounds and everything, your profile. So that was kind of an interesting application. But there's so much to talk about with respect to understanding the taxonomy and the lexicons and the whole, the whole almost code or guidelines associated with words and phrases and language. And so I'm super, super happy that Chris will be on the show today. A couple of other things just to share with you. Interesting enough, Bob Farnham, who is my local hashtag man, Word Geeks Rule. Bob is a regular on the after show, on the Zoom after show, and both of us were wearing black shirts and had black backgrounds, and we took a little photo. And I think this may be another way that people can express themselves, because expressing oneself is important. It is important to be able to express ourselves any way we can. And part of what I've been preaching over the last weeks, months, etc., is about acceptance and tolerance and patience, and everything helps and everyone helps and anything matters and everything matters. But this is another way that we can show our solidarity through virtual backgrounds. It's just another way that we can use visual identity in order to be able to communicate an idea or a message. Again, if you're looking for a resource, there are many out there. I'm seeing so many things coming across our paths. It's amazing, actually, to see all of this stuff. Resources. I think there was one that I got, which I'll share with you another time. 70 things you can do to demonstrate that you are anti-racist as opposed to non-racist. You need to be both, but certainly anti-racist at a time like this. And that is a URL you can visit, and that you can actually take action and educate yourself and conduct the research. Today is today is National Running Day. So happy National Running Day. Interestingly enough, I went for a run this morning. I don't normally run in the mornings. I run in the afternoons or evenings. And I went for a run because it's meant to be kind of dark and stormy and inclement weather. And then I found out later it's National Running Day. And I just happened to also take a photo as well in beautiful green, lush Westport, Connecticut. So that was actually just me on my run this morning, just seeing a sign and how iconic the sign looked. And again, it's another way, even in an affluent area or neighborhood, that people can express themselves. You can express yourselves, and you can express yourself about me. If you like the stuff I'm doing, if you like this episode, if you like Chris, if you like Corona TV, then literally like this episode right now. Comment so I can see who you are, so I can mention you on the show. Share the stream if you're watching live or even afterwards, and share the idea behind Corona TV, which, as I describe it now, it's about hope, it's about optimism, it's about positivity. And if there's time left over, yeah, we'll talk a little bit of marketing as well. That used to be my day job before the world went to hell. And of course, you can always subscribe to the show as well. So as I've alluded to and mentioned several times, my guest today, who will join the tapestry of smiles, is Chris West. Chris, I think I forgot to actually update it. It says speaker, author, and CEO. And you know what? I'm pretty sure you are a speaker. You're speaking to me. I'm pretty sure you're an author because you rant on LinkedIn all the time. And I know you're a CEO. He is the CEO of not visual identity, but verbal identity. And he's going to be coming onto the show soon enough. So happy birthdays. Aaron Mikey, I think he was in Australia, then he came to the US. Maybe he's back in Australia. I'm not really sure. So just happy birthday to all my Facebook friends. And of course, to my LinkedIn friends as well. Some of you are still sheltering in place, and hopefully you're not feeling as alone or isolated because of Corona TV. Everything counts as well. In today's Seated Soliloquy, I'm going to be talking about words and words matter. And I really like the idea of being able to tie this monologue into my guest and into something that inspires me about my guests. And so today I wanted to talk to you just about that, right? About the power of words. Words matter, but do they? Time after time, then candidate Trump used words to gin up tremendous mixed emotion from within the US. Never before had a candidate used the power of words to create such a media frenzy, and with it, millions upon millions of daily earned media impressions. Now, every time Trump broke a cardinal rule or desecrated an age-old taboo, commentators shook their heads and wagged their fingers, saying, words matter. But did they? Nothing happened. Nothing. No rebuke, no apology, no backing down, no mea culpa. Now that I think about it, I couldn't have been more wrong. Words do matter, and words do work. They worked so well, they helped elect a reality TV star as America's first direct-to-consumer president. His words energized and mobilized a small but significant base that provided the undiluted, unapologetic, and uncompromising fuel for a frenzy and fire that was powered by words. On the other end, words mattered too, but had the opposite effect. Deplorable, Benghazi, email. Perhaps it's true that it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Or perhaps it's who's saying it that counts. Growing up, I remember hearing the phrase, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never harm me. Now, while that statement might fit into a 140 or 280 character limit, it couldn't be further from the truth. Words matter. I have a dream. Words matter. Yes, we can. Words matter. I can't breathe. Words matter, but even more, ideas matter too. And ideas that can be expressed through the power of the spoken or written word are capable of creating moments, movements, and the kind of change that can transform and change the world. There is nothing as powerful as an idea whose time has come. Victor Hugo. And to which I say, word. And now it's time to bring on my guest, Mr. Chris West. It rhymes. Bring on my guest, Chris West.
That's the only reason you had me here. I know that.
And your British accent, which, let me tell you, people always tell me they love my South African accent and makes me seem smart. But I feel the same way about the Brits. They open their mouths and just they can be dumb as a box of rocks, but they just exude intelligence. And you, my friend, are not dumb.
Can you hear the difference in British accents, or do they all sound the same?
Well, I was going to say you were from New Zealand, but no, I would say you're from. Yes, I can. I mean, I can tell. Paul Gascoigne. I'm a big Spurs fan. Geordie boy, Tyneside versus a Mancunian versus a Liverpudlian. I'm generally okay, but you sound like a posh Londoner, though.
Well, if my family were here, they'd be laughing. They'd be rolling on the floor laughing, calling me posh, because I'm not posh. But
I said posh Londoner. But you are from London, right? London, though, right?
Yeah, I'm from London. That's absolutely right. Not posh. I wouldn't say I'm posh, but it's one of those things about language and intonation that you can put someone into a category very quickly. And I was reading something. I want to talk about your soliloquy in a minute, which was wonderful. But I was reading something today around how language or dialect is the most obvious marker of someone's origin when being used to discriminate against them in the pandemic. So if you sound Chinese, whatever that means, okay, whatever sounding Chinese means, but if you sound Chinese, people are immediately mentally associating you with the virus and with Wuhan. And that's obviously terrible, but it shows how much language weaves its way all the way through everything we're doing all the time. Not just kind of like people think that language is out here, but language is what's going on in here as well.
It's so interesting because, and by the way, we'll just, Adam Zan says, Liverpudlian is the voice of champions. So he still believes they're going to lift the trophy at the end of the day. And I guess if no one is positive for the coronavirus, he may actually end up enjoying that far-flung success. And hello to
everyone's going to say it's an empty title this year. Everyone except Liverpudlian fans. Every other team is going to go, it's an empty title because we were just rising through the table. We'd won that last game, and the break meant that we lost our training, we lost our form. Otherwise, we would have won. But Adam will be happy.
Yeah. So listen, Adam, you're getting a lot more silverware than in my Spurs closet, which is bare and full of cobwebs. So who am I? I'm only smiling because it's my show and it's my voice. But Chris, it's so funny because first of all, you're a very considerate person. It's very obvious to me. You're a very kind, considerate person. Don't be so shocked. But you were, even when I reached out a little bit, I'm quite self-deprecating at the best of times. And I said, hey, looks like it's another white male week. You were kind of like, you actually volunteered and you said, do you want to replace me? And I was like, I would have liked to have replaced Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, but no, I'm kidding. They're not here to defend themselves. But I really appreciate that consideration. And then today you posted, before you beat me to the punch, you posted on LinkedIn, you said, I have no idea what we're even going to talk about, but I'm going to be on Joseph's show. And then, you inspired some thinking today, which was, I could get the opportunity to interview some of the more interesting people in the world through the show. And everyone, first of all, is interesting. And in 30 minutes, they'd better be interesting. And in fact, I would probably take a guess and say everyone in the world can be interesting in 30 minutes. So
Yeah.
what an honor it is to be able to sit down with someone and talk to them what they care about, what they love, and what is interesting to them, and then finding the nuggets inside them and sharing that with people. So, as much as we may have even jotted some questions down, I have a feeling we won't even get there because what you study and what you work in is so interesting to me, the power of words and the power of language.
Thank you. And by the way, your Monday and Tuesday guests were great. So, everyone should stop watching now and just watch them. They'll be a lot better, and get some rest to watch Thursday and Friday. But yeah, I do love language, and I'm not sure really why or when it started. You probably didn't look at my background, but people normally assume I did an English degree or something like that. I studied human physiology, which is all about how the body works and how you can be sitting down 1 minute, eating a banana muffin. I've got my banana muffin there. Sitting down eating a banana muffin 1 minute, and your body is perfectly tuned to digesting that, flowing the blood to the right place and everything else. And then something happens, and the next minute you can be sprinting down the street and your body is perfectly adjusted to that. What an amazing thing the body is. So that's why I studied physiology. And then I didn't know what I was going to do. So I did, and I'm always very upfront about it. I did a very dodgy postgraduate degree at Cambridge University in computer science. And I think that was the big leap for me, probably for two reasons, actually. First reason was I dated a girl who was a language philosopher. And I didn't realize that was significant because I didn't really understand what she was doing until but she was really interesting. But then I went to work for a firm that sold computers for 2 years. And I hated it so much that I had to go 180 degrees in a different direction. If I kind of liked it, then I would have just moved a bit to one side and done that. But actually, I hated it so much that I had to decide what else to do. And I just worked out what were the two greatest skills that I admired in other people. One was selling, that ability to to have someone who's got a very firm idea in their head and then help them to change that idea so they think something completely different. So that was one great skill. And the other great skill I really admired was writing. And I realized that I've been cutting out pieces of great writing from newspapers and magazines and highlighting them in novels and stuff. And I thought, okay, if you put these two things together, what do you get? You get selling and you get language. That's advertising, right? So I went and got a job in advertising. And I did that for 15 years. And I was always kind of, I don't mean this in a self-aggrandizing way, I was always a writer's writer. And what I mean by that is some writers are really good at art direction. And my art director at Saatchi's, a wonderful man called John Messam, used to slide, have I ever told you this? He used to slide two layouts. We'd work on British Airways. He'd slide two press layouts across the desk to me and he'd say, Chris, which one do you prefer? And I'd say, oh, come on, John, you're doing it again, aren't you? They're both the same. And he'd go, no, look, Chris, the headline is below the visual here and the visual is above the headline there and I've aligned that. I was like, well, you decide, John. Right, so I have no eye for art direction, but I found that I would have discussions literally at 1:30 in the morning about commas and about use of language and about narrative, overarching narrative and stuff like that. And I really, really cared about language. So I changed running a project-based ad business. I had the opportunity to walk away from that and I started verbal identity just because I could see the power of language and I cared intensely about it. And in some ways, this is where I've been heading, in that I love language, but I also love how things work. So human physiology, the engineering, human physiology, I realized in the middle of a meeting once with a client, I suddenly went, oh, I've just understood what I did for a degree. And they were like, okay. But that engineering and language, and when you put those together, you get this love of language and how it works. So sometimes what I say about verbal identity is we're interested in the magic and mechanics of language. So
there's so much sausage factory stuff, right? If you understand how it's made. And I'm attracted to this conversation because you know, I come from the same world, right? From marketing and advertising, and there's an overused phrase which is for me like nails on a chalkboard, which is storytelling. It's all about stories. And of course, I believe it and you believe it, but I don't know that the people that are in the business of apparently telling stories actually really understand the power of storytelling and how to be able to tell different kinds of stories that can stand out and break through the clutter.
Yeah, I think there's a lot wrapped up in storytelling. I think there's our slight, like you say, nails about people are using this expression storytelling, and everyone, like, so people use words like numbers thinking that they have a precise meaning, and they don't. They have the meaning, they have one meaning, which is what was in the person's head when it was said, and another meaning which depends on what's in my head when the word lands. So people use storytelling in different ways, but I think it's an evolution of narrative. You know how 20 years ago we used to talk, I remember in about 2000 being on a plane and reading the Wall Street Journal and reading this article saying brands or companies are now using narrative. And I was thinking, yeah, that's odd. How can a commercially focused organization use something that starts once upon a time? How can they use something which has got beginning, middle, and end? And that's one of the problems of language, which they say narrative and I hear, you know, you say tomatoes and I hear something else. But in this sense of narrative, as I began to understand it, is this idea that our brains intuitively have a narrative bias, if you like. And isn't it awful? Like we're 18 minutes into our discussion, and already I've come up with a neuro theory. You know, like everyone says, "Oh, we're hardwired too." Like but it's kind of like I don't have any evidence for that. I'm not saying this is another neuro theory, but what I mean is, our brains are really good at saying, based on my previous experience, if that happened, followed by that, then the most likely thing to happen next is this. And you can imagine that that's a fundamental human need from our ancestors, because if you were 50,000 years ago standing in the African bush and you hear the roar of what is probably a ferocious animal 100 yards away, and then the next thing you hear is the ground shaking as a quarter-ton animal comes closer and closer to you, your brain had better work out what the next thing is in the sequence in order to avoid getting eaten by a lion. So there is a sense in our brains that we have, that we can build patterns and predict the future based on patterns that have happened before. And so for that reason, I think narrative is important for brands, because what you don't want to do, what a brand doesn't want to do is one thing one day, something kind of logically related to that the next day, and then something else completely unrelated to that the next day. Because people will go, that confuses my narrative understanding of what this brand is. And when we're confused, we walk away. And so, and language is like that. I think brand language has to clearly define its narrative. It has to say, we are these kinds of people that believe in this kind of thing, and we stand against that.
I found that to be fascinating, but I don't know if
Neuro-theory count one.
But we're on which is better than the F-bomb count, which my last few guests have been intent on turning this podcast from clean to or undisclosed to explicit. So do not, keep filling the neuro theory container. Stay away from the F-bombs. But Chris, you shared this earlier. It was something that you shared with me, and I'll kind of put it full screen so people at home can look at this and maybe just set this up a little bit, and then we can talk about it, because I think it does bring what you were talking about with respect to this idea of patterns or patterned responses.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things here. One is that people sometimes think that language is something that happens occasionally. So with a brand, if you're a CMO, you think like, well, I've got my website and I've done the brand. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear the emergency responders outside.
As long as they're not coming for you.
Well, maybe, but they've got the wrong address. So we've got another 5 minutes. So a lot of people think that language is something that is switched on, done, and then switched off. Particularly with brands, they think that, I've got my website done, and the social media people are doing the social media thing. And what they forget that language is everywhere, every moment in their company. So it is what the CEO says on the quarterly earnings report. It is what investor relations brief to the journalists. It is what the person who picks up the phone in head office says. It is how you brief your external partners, and how you conjure an idea of who you are in their mind using language. It's what you say to your team, the language that you use, the language that you choose to use when you're talking to your team. That shapes how they understand what the project is, what you are as a company, what your overarching narrative is as a team or as a company. Language works everywhere all the time. So I think the first thing about this is that we sometimes see language just washing past us, and we think, oh, language, or we don't even notice it. We don't notice how language buzzes our brains all the time. And about this chart in particular, the first thing I should say really is that I should remember who compiled the chart, and I can't. But I'll try and give you a link at the end, and or after this, and we'll share a link for sure, because it's a good piece of research. But what it's saying is that maybe like narrative, if you can construct the narrative, if you can conjure with your language well enough and get away with it once, you can keep on getting away with it. So over on the right is almost like the playbook of language for what the authorities were saying about climate change. Now, Jonathan Franzen isn't necessarily a government authority, but there were some clear stages in how people were talking about climate change. It's not happening, right? It's a hoax. Then, well, it's not a hoax, but it's not our fault. Or, hey, it's not that bad. We're not going to do anything about it because solutions are too costly. And anyway, it's too late. And that playbook of language has been used during coronavirus as well. So do you remember, I'm not beating up on anyone's president, right? But I am going to say what I remember hearing, which is the president calling it a hoax. And then moving the language very quickly from it's not happening to it's not our fault, calling it the China virus or Kung flu at one point. Then saying it's not that bad, then the playbook is working again, solutions are too costly. Yeah, what do we take out of that? Know your language, because it's everywhere.
So, by the way, I'm debuting a new idea today, which is the fact that we've shrunk a little bit, but there is a quote at the bottom that kind of almost like a little packaging or overlay. Do you know who said, but if thought corrupts language, language can also corrupt thought?
Well, I wish I did. I'm going to make some guesses. Excuse me.
If you get it right, you can come back on the show.
Oh, okay. My first thought is it might be George Orwell. Because
damn you! You're right.
Is it?
It was George Orwell. Yeah. How about that? Isn't that great? You really know your stuff. And Steve just said, Steve paid clearly you a compliment, right? He said, this is so well organized and presented, which has nothing to do with me. I'm not saying anything. It's all you, Chris. the great facilitator. I was once told I'm a legend in my own mind. But carry on. I thought it was interesting to go to this as well, because there were two things. The first thing is, I think what I took away from what you showed is that language can be predictive. And when you use, or when you hear, or when you read certain phrases or keywords, now you can almost compartmentalize and contextualize and be able to say, not only where have I heard this before, but where is this heading? And I think that's pretty helpful.
Yeah, and don't let me get, because I'm familiar with the train, don't let me get pushed on it and taken where someone else wants. You know, if the language is familiar and it's a nice warm bath that someone's asking you, that's another metaphor. You've got a metaphor count as well as a neurotheory count, but it's like a nice warm bath. You know, if the language is familiar and the idea is familiar, then you'll kind of go with it wherever someone is taking. It's a warm bath on a train. How about that, Joseph? Does that work? No, not at all. But
yeah, we're going to keep the metaphor count at 0, or we could actually update that and and have because I am the king of the extended metaphor, but you, my friend, are the king of what I would call the bad metaphor count. I'm just kidding. I'm just teasing.
Okay, thank you. No, I'm happy with that. Well, particularly because it's all about linguistic theory. And when I was a copywriter in London, and I would sometimes propose a piece of copy to these aliens called clients. And they would say, okay, but why did you write that? And all I had was what I call the copywriter's shrug. They say, why do you write that? And I go, I'm the writer. You know, that's all I had. When I set up, before I set up Verbal Identity, I found a tutor, a linguistics academic, who tutored me on linguistics, because I always knew there was something about how language worked, which was really important to understand. And the more you understand about how language works, then it's more fun, obviously, but it helps you work with language a lot better, including metaphors. So, and there's a great language theorist, and I think his name is Lakoff, but he says that essentially the way we think is composed of metaphor after metaphor after metaphor. So even in that sentence, composed, is it a composition? What does it mean? You know, I'm using compose like, so you know that we mean like words on a page or compose a picture. And then metaphor after metaphor after metaphor. That's a time metaphor. So to say one metaphor follows another. So your metaphor count should be like 1,000, because all the time we're using metaphors to navigate. But learning about linguistics was wonderful. I originally thought maybe it's just going to be a kind of like a shtick, that you've got to have something, and I'm advising on brand language, and so why am I different from someone else that walks in because I know about linguistics? But actually, the more I understood about linguistics, the more fascinating, the more useful it was. So remember how horrible it can be sometimes dealing with contact centers. You phone up and immediately the conversation goes wrong. You know, within 5 seconds, you know the conversation is going to go wrong. And I found as I was being tutored, I found this thing called, I was told about this thing called the Journal of Politeness Research. And I remember my joy, first of all, that there was actually a journal dedicated to politeness research. So, you know, that's one amazing thing. But the other thing was a finding in the Journal of Politeness Research where they said that if the markers of a proper social conversation aren't represented right at the beginning of a conversation, then the conversation goes wrong. So what does that mean, other than just being interesting dinner party conversation? It means that if you're setting up a contact center and you're asking people, and you kind of want more of the conversations to end in success than they are at the moment, you want fewer conversations ending in failure, then one of the things you can do is ask all your team to put in the markers of normal social conversation right at the front. So if the first thing out of their mouth is, can you give me your customer ID? Then that's not how you and I speak. If the first thing out of their mouth is, hi, how are you? Then it's a mark of a normalized social conversation. So just learning something like that can really help understand language and understand how language works. So that's the mechanics of language as well as the magic.
It's so fascinating. And, you know, then there's the other thing where a word can take on a different meaning or can evolve over time. And so we've kind of gone on this interesting little journey. But before I do, I just had to share this, which is this to me is the guy that I was getting on the show. And then suddenly I see this guy, and I was like, oh, I'm sorry, you must be on the wrong show. I'm looking for an intelligent British man with glasses. But you told me you've just had surgery at laser.
Yeah, 5 months ago I had corrective eye surgery because, well, a very specific reason actually, which is my children are now 14 years old, and I wanted to be able to swim in the sea and see them, which I couldn't do with glasses. I maybe could do with contact lenses, but then you get into another level of complication. So I wanted to be able to, very specific thing, I want to be able to swim in the sea with my kids, know where they are, and have fun with them. So yeah, I had corrective eye surgery right at the beginning of the year, thinking there's this thing coming, maybe it's okay, maybe I'll just get the eye surgery done anyway. And I got it done in time with no complications, which is great. But I've said to my wife, right, I want to keep on wearing glasses. And she says, what are you talking about? Why don't wear glasses? Because I feel like, I think personal brand is probably too strong a word, but I've been wearing glasses for 40 something years, right? Because I'm 56. So, and I feel they're really part of me, and I feel like that. So yes, okay. So I'll wear these. These would be like my
that's
my make-believe opera glasses. Anyway, you got the wrong guy. I know that.
So that's your evil persona. But I want to tackle one more thing now that I've embarrassed you enough. You won't want to come back on the show. But I want to tackle one other thing that you shared earlier, which was this sign. And I think it also talks to, if there is any takeaway from today, it is, besides words matter, besides the power of words, besides the power of language, there's also the ability for that static word to take on a different meaning at a different time from a different perspective. And so maybe set this up a little bit and we'll discuss.
Okay, so I felt like you were signaling just as we went into this that time is limited. We won't have a lot of time together. So that's fine.
Oh, no,
one of the things I want to come to, and we can do it now or we can do it in the after show, is how the worst mistake that anyone can make is thinking that their brand voice, their brand language is just about tone of voice. It's really not. Tone is one level. There are 3 levels to the voice. And if you focus on one and ignore the others, that's why brand language goes all over the place. But specifically, coming back to this, I saw this 2-3 weeks ago. So what, we're 8 weeks into, 5-6 weeks into lockdown crisis. Some of the words that we're hearing, we will, if we're lucky enough to have grandchildren, we will use those words with them. We will talk about coronavirus. We'll use language like social distancing. We might use language like flattening the curve. So language is suddenly playing a role in this pandemic. The New Yorker's written articles about it. The Atlantic's written articles about it. There's a whole load of stuff about this. The Economist, by the way, if you ever get a chance to read the Economist column, which is called, it's gone out of my mind. They've got a whole column on language, runs every other week. It's written by the most intelligent guy on language you'll ever meet, called Robert Bain-Green. Really, he should be on your show, not me. I'm a dilettante. He really knows his stuff. But yeah, everyone's writing about language and how language has emerged in the pandemic. And this caught my eye because when we went into the start of this crisis, one of the words we heard suddenly was key workers, right? They're a key worker. Look after them. They should be allowed to do that. We need our key workers. And so
we would have said here essential services, right? So,
yeah. And that's exactly, there's that sense of essentiality and time critical nature to it. something that is important and something that can't be put off to another time. So essential workers, key workers have a largely overlapping meaning. And you kind of respect your key workers. If someone said, I'm a key worker, you would give them some distance. If someone said, can you go and help this person, they're a key worker, you would go out of your way to help them. So key workers had this idea baked into it, this valuable resource to be protected and actually to be excused or to be allowed certain freedoms or privileges that the rest of us maybe had to forego at the moment. 5 weeks into the lockdown, I see this, which is a road sign saying our key workers are completing safety critical work. Da, 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 right? First of all, there's 8, 2, 4, 6, there's 30 words there. No one in a car is going to be able to read 30 words as they drive past. That's one thing. But they've co-opted key workers as a word to say these people doing this work on the road aren't just normal workers, and you can't be upset with them because they're in your way and you're having to drive somewhere else around. They're key workers. And someone will say, well, how do you know they weren't doing safety critical work? It's because I went back later and I looked and they were just digging up the road, right? Someone has kind of stolen the meaning that we as a society have given key workers. They'd stolen that for themselves and reattributed it to something else, which didn't, in my mind, deserve that value. Not because those people weren't doing good work, but because they didn't fit the value that had been given to the work of essential workers, to the word of essential workers.
Well, I think on the flip side, I know and I'm sure many people would agree, we hope that the term essential services will be now aligned with people that work checking out in a grocery store or a teacher, or so many professions and jobs that either earn minimum wage or had been overlooked, that hadn't been celebrated until this time. So, but it's interesting to me how, in a way, I mean, it goes back to what we were saying, right? Which is a word or phrase changes its meaning over time. I want to ask you one more question while we have a bit of time.
Okay.
Well, we've got an after show, and I've got I've got 10 questions to ask you in the after show. So you're not getting rid of me this quickly. In fact, what I should do is just to tell people about the after show if they'd like to join us. Don't join us in the Zoom after show, where Chris won't treat us to a language mini masterclass, because you haven't done that already. So hopefully you'll actually deliver some value. No,
I will.
I was listening to Jerry Seinfeld being interviewed on Howard Stern, and he talks about something that is a huge Seinfeldism, is brevity. He tries to get to the punchline in the least number of syllables, consonants, words, letters as possible. And he tells a joke and the joke involves a slave ship, but because of sensitivity, he needed to tell the joke, to an audience and put an international spin on it. And so he sat down with his kids and he had a choice between calling it a Greek slave ship or a Roman slave ship. And which one did he go with?
Greek.
Why?
Because Roman would have a context of modern Roman, and he needed to just
shorter, one syllable. Greek versus 2 Roman, and that was the essence of him getting to the punchline quicker. And I guess my final question to you is: we live in this world of Twitter. Twitter's certainly in the news today. 140 characters, 280 characters. Brevity seems to be the evolution of the narrative and the evolution of the story. Nike, just do it. Moving over to don't do it. How do you feel about brevity being part of this conversation? Is it just coincidental, or is it very much a deliberate part of how we communicate in this cluttered, noisy, and attention-starved world?
On brevity, I think get there before your reader, get there before your audience, and brevity helps you. So you're delivering the punchline. So you're constantly leading them forward, which if you're listening to a great comedian is a joy, right? They're just half a step ahead of you all the time. And you're computing what they've just said, and already they've told you the next thing, and it confounds what's in your head at that moment. So I think brevity helps that. I think I've had 3 great editors. And it was always around brevity, always. So my first great editor was my wonderful creative director at Saatchi's, and I would show him a piece of work, like a headline, and he would look at it and he would twiddle his collar like this. Then he'd reach out a thumb and he'd put a thumb over a word and he'd go, do we need this word? I don't think we do. Do we need this? No, we don't. And he would make it 10% better by taking 1 word out of a 5-word headline. So he was my first editor. Just shorter, neater, easier to assimilate, get there quicker, get there ahead of your reader. Second great editor, I think, was Twitter, because you had to be good to say it. You had to have your idea absolutely clear in your mind to be able to say it in 140 characters. You couldn't go here, you couldn't go there, you had to go there. So I think Twitter was a great second editor. And my third editor was literally an editor. I used to write travel pieces for the Sunday Times. And she would always say to me, what's the sell? And by that she meant, you've got to be able to say it in 1 sentence. Because imagine the old days of the newspaper salesman standing there, he's got to be able to shout a headline, he's got to get it, be able to say it, and you've got to be able to have your argument really succinct. So brevity, get there before your reader. Don't ask them to take another junk.
Yeah,
if we have an after show party, Joseph, if we have an after show,
which we do,
there are no guarantees. Who knows what's going to happen, right? There are no guarantees. If we do, I would certainly love to talk about the 3 levels of brand language, because that's how brand language works. I would love to talk about how a well-known president co-opted language. But that's maybe, but the thing I most want to talk about is this pandemic has showed the supremacy of language. So I would say that this time round, everyone can see that if you want to change people's behavior, use language. If you want to change people's beliefs, use language. And that's what language was designed for. So you and I know what we mean by flattening the curve, right? 3 words, we've got it. It's as good as sticks and stones may break my bones. And that's what is uniquely brilliant about language, that it can create this meme, and I can transfer it to you, and you can transfer it to someone else, and you don't need a phone to do it, right? It's what we do all the time because we're language animals. It proves the supremacy of language over all other communication tools. Because in the UK, we had this slogan that the government used to stand behind, literally and metaphorically stand behind, which was stay home. See, now I can't remember it. Oh, stay home. Stay home, save lives, protect the NHS. That's not a failure of the line. That was a failure of my old age brain, and it's exactly dinner time now for me. Stay home, protect lives, save the NHS, right? Everyone except for me, apparently, everyone in the UK except for me can remember that expression and could repeat it, right? I don't know anyone that can remember the design, the color, the font, the Pantone reference, or anything else. Language is supreme at communicating because we're language animals, and it means that language holds ideas. Language is the way that ideas get out of my head, fly through space and land in your head. And it's language which creates identity. Us as a community feel together, whether that's a Black Lives Matter hashtag or something else. Language creates an identity and it creates a belief, and that's what changes behavior. It's language which changes behavior.
Mr. Chris West, you have certainly given us a bit of a masterclass. Steve Garfield is the world's most helpful man, and he is giving
Steve, thank you.
he told you need to update your Twitter bio with that URL, and he said Verb ID is the Twitter account name I was looking for. So yeah, you've got a lot of Twitter. I found out that you've got a lot of Twitter accounts. You've even got a wobbly one or a weird one, or I like it. I like it too. You are a man.
How did you find that? Wow, you're good. Okay, LinkedIn is where I blather on most.
You are a man of mystery, Mr. Chris West. I appreciate your contributions today. I learned a lot. Before you go, you have an opportunity to plug anything and everything you want. I don't think you even need to, because I think people are now going to be typing verbal identity right now into their browsers. But I have something to ask of you, which is a new thing I'm trying to do here, which is, can you recommend, I think you did kind of, can you recommend a guest that you think would enjoy coming on the show? And if you would be so kind as to make an introduction, if you know them, that would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely, I'll do that. Do you want me to say now? I mean, Robert Lane Green from The Economist, who writes their column on language and business, he's amazing. He's absolutely amazing. For a moment, the name has gone out of my head for his compadre at the Wall Street Journal, who writes on language in business for the Wall Street Journal. I can find him.
If you
both
can,
men,
that'd be awesome. Yeah,
both men, both white. That's not good enough. I will. Oh man, there's so many brilliant women. Oh, my linguistics tutor. She should be on here talking to you. She's wonderful. Yeah, there's so many people. I'll see what I can think up.
Thank you, my friend. So
my pleasure. Thank you.
So verbalidentity.com. He has 12,000 Twitter accounts where you can sleuth him out, the man of mystery, the English man of mystery, the non-posh Londoner of mystery.
The best way is LinkedIn. Sorry to interrupt you, Joseph.
Where you ramble and rant, and in fact, there was a great yeah. I've been reading some of your stuff as well. I've been enjoying it. Adam said this was great, and that's because it was. So we're going to head over to bits.ly/CoronaTV after show and enjoy a little bit more of Chris West because this was awesome. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you for giving me the space. And to anyone that's suffered all the way through it to the end, thank you very much as well.
I don't think there was any suffering.
See you at the show.